The village lay nestled between two ridges, where the ancient forest rose high and mysterious on all sides, shading the small homes made of thatch and stone. In this quiet place, elders told tales that seemed to dance with the flickering light of a hearth, and few stories were better than those told by Ivar, a man so old his hair was silver and his voice deep as the hollow drums they beat during the harvest festivals. Ivar's grandson, Fenn, had inherited the old man's curious spark. He was a boy of 8, with dark, bright eyes and a quick step. Though his friends often liked to run to the river or climb trees, Fenn found himself often by his grandfather's side, asking questions, listening to stories, and watching the old man's hands work with the patience of someone who had learned life's slow rhythms. On one particular morning, Fenn followed Ivar as he left their small stone house with a worn basket in hand. His grandfather's walking staff, knotted and carved, thumped softly against the ground as they made their way down the narrow path out of the village. "Where are we going today, grandfather?" Fenn asked, catching up to Ivar with a lively step. "To the eastern woods," Ivar said with a nod. "There are herbs to gather, and I have a story that belongs to that place. Come along, but stay close. These trees are old, Fenn. Older than you and me. Older than the village itself." Fenn felt his heartbeat quicken with excitement. There were stories about the eastern woods of old spirits, of long-forgotten paths that only reappeared under the moonlight. He wanted to ask about them, but something about his grandfather's words held him back. He stayed close, watching the way Ivar moved, and how his hand brushed over the tall, whispering ferns as they walked. The morning was cool, and a thin mist lingered around their feet as they walked deeper into the woods. Ivar paused here and there, kneeling to gather herbs or mushrooms, slipping them into the basket with a careful hand. Fenn crouched next to him, watching closely. "Grandfather," Fenn asked after a long silence, "why do you always bring me here, and not anyone else?" Ivar paused and looked at his grandson with a faint smile. "Because, Fenn, you have the heart of a seeker. You do not just listen, you understand. That is something very precious." They continued their walk in silence until they came to a small clearing. A single ancient tree stood there, its branches twisted and gnarled. Ivar gestured to it, his eyes serious. "Sit here," he said softly, motioning to the roots of the tree. Fenn obeyed, feeling the rough bark against his back. Ivar settled beside him, setting down the basket. "When I was your age," Ivar began, "I came to this very spot with my own grandfather. I was young, like you, and full of questions. I remember asking him why he had brought me all the way out here, to this old tree, when there were so many others closer to the village." Fenn listened, his eyes wide. "My grandfather told me that this tree was older than all the others in the forest," Ivar continued. "It has seen more seasons, more lives, and more stories than we could imagine. He said that each year, when autumn turned to winter, he would come here and ask the tree for guidance." Fenn's brow furrowed. "Guidance? From a tree?" Ivar chuckled, his laughter deep and warm. "Yes, though it may sound strange. The tree doesn't speak in words, but it speaks in its own way. It has roots that go deep into the earth and branches that reach up to the sky. It sees things from all sides." Ivar pointed to the twisted roots, which seemed to form a natural seat. "When I was a boy, I would sit there, like you are now, and listen. I would let the forest speak. Sometimes it was just the rustle of leaves, or the call of a distant bird. But sometimes it was more. Do you understand?" Fenn looked up at the tree's gnarled branches, feeling a strange sense of awe. "I think so." "Good," Ivar said, resting a hand on Fenn's shoulder. "One day, when you are older, you will understand more. You'll bring your own children or grandchildren, and you'll sit here with them. And they will look at you as you look at me now, full of questions, seeking answers."
They sat in silence for a long while. Fenn closed his eyes and let the sounds of the forest wash overhead, the chirping of insects, the rustling leaves, even the faint trickling of water from a hidden dream. They all seem to form a song, an ancient melody that spoke of roots and branches, of things that were and things that would be.
After a while, Ivar stirred. "Come, Fenn, there's one more thing I want to show you." They rose, and Ivar led him deeper into the forest, to a small, hidden stream where the water flowed clear and cold. He reached into the water and pulled out a small, flat stone, handing it to Fenn. "Hold this," Ivar said. "It's smooth, isn't it?" Fenn nodded, running his fingers over its surface. "This stone has been here for hundreds of years," Ivar said softly. "The stream has washed over it, softened it, shaped it. In many ways, we are like this stone. Life shapes us, smooths our rough edges. And one day, we return to the earth, like everything else."
Fenn looked at the stone in his hand, feeling its weight. It was small, simple, yet it felt strangely significant. "Will you remember this, Fenn?" Ivar asked, his voice softer now, almost a whisper. "Will you remember the tree and the stone? Remember what they teach us?" "Yes, grandfather," Fenn said, his voice steady. "I will remember." They walked back to the village as the sun began to dip behind the trees, casting long shadows on the path. Fenn felt a quiet sense of peace settle over him. He knew that someday, he would bring his own children to the ancient tree and tell them the story of the stone in the stream. And as they stepped into the village once more, Fenn realized that his grandfather's stories were more than tales, they were roots, reaching down deep into his heart, connecting him to the past and the future, like the roots of the ancient tree.